Ladies and gentlemen, moving on, right away, straight away, immediately in our forum to keynote speech number 1, the theme of which is the overview of Asia's cruise market. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Vice President of Commercial Development, Royal Caribbean Cruise Limited, Mr. John Tursek.
Thank you for the opportunity to make a presentation, and thank you to our wonderful hosts for organizing such a nice event. We had a fantastic local food meal last night at the wonderful arts section along the waterfront. A very nice evening, and I'm delighted to see so many friends and acquaintances, not only from Taiwan, but also from the neighboring countries, and enthusiastic supporters of the growing tourism. Thank you for this opportunity to make this speech. I'll try to speak slowly, but I tend to speak quickly. So if I speak too fast, just wave your hand in the back and I'll slow down. I'm going to put up a lot of slides, and this information will be available, so you don't need to be thinking about making notes. Just listen to the presentation. I'm going to give you a lot of information, some of which you may know already, but some might be new. I'm going to try to cover quickly a variety of topics, and let's see. Okay. How do you make this work? Oh, okay. This is what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to first touch on the industry, because I felt it's useful. This is the first cruise forum in Taiwan, so let's take a look at what is the cruise industry today. The deployment drivers. Why are we going into new markets, and what's making that happen? Port development criteria. My role for Royal Caribbean is planning for the future, and I've been working with many of the destinations in Asia now about the infrastructure requirements. I'm going to give some examples, and I'm going to give some examples of port developments in other parts of the world, which we can maybe look at as examples for the Asia. And then I'm going to look at some of the current itineraries that the industry is working on in Southeast Asia. Now, I apologize to anyone from Korea or from Japan in the audience, because last week there was supposed to be a Korean cruise workshop, and I had prepared a speech for Korea and Japan, and I anticipated that I would focus on Central and Southeast Asia in this presentation today. The cruise forum, unfortunately, was canceled in Korea because of the tragedy with the Korean ferry boat last month. I'm going to start out. Royal Caribbean. We're the second largest cruise line. We represent about 25% of the industry. Together with our competitor, the Carnival Group, we represent about 75% of the industry. So our industry is a very small oligopoly. There's only 4 companies that dominate about 90% of it, but we've all been growing steadily for the last 30 years. Carnival Group, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and MSC Cruise Lines from Italy. Royal has 42 ships. We operate 6 different brands. We go to many destinations. We carry over 5 million passengers. We have more than 60,000 employees. We're an American company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And as you may be aware, Royal Caribbean is known for building larger ships. We, every 4 years or so, we bring out the newest ship, and we make a big splash about it, and we feel it helps the industry grow with the novelty and news and excitement about these new ships, including Oasis of the Seas and now Quantum of the Seas. As a disclaimer, these are my own comments and points of view here. I'm not really sort of saying this is the corporate policy of Royal Caribbean, but this is John Tursek making some personal observation in this speech today. And I've gathered statistics from some top experts for some of the information I'm going to show. Here's a snapshot of the cruise industry right now. This year, we're going to carry over 21 million, about 22 million guests during 2014. We've been growing about 7% a year for the last 25 years. There are about 310 ships operating, carrying 440,000 passengers. So right today at sea, there's almost 450,000 passengers cruising on ships today, as we're here today. The industry continues to order new ships. There are 28 new ships that are ordered and under construction. The ships are built in Europe, in Italy, France, Germany, and Finland. This steadily increasing new ships creates the need for new markets and new destinations, and that's what my speech is going to focus on today. Here's some trends. I don't know if you can read it in the back of the room. The ships are getting bigger. This is no surprise. Anyone familiar with the cruise business is aware of this. But in planning for the future, it's important to factor in this trend that the ships are getting bigger. We've seen ports in the world where they build something based on today's traffic, but in 5 years, it's obsolete. So anybody that's involved in infrastructure must be planning on bigger ships. Out of the new ships under construction, 18 of them are over 100,000 tons. This is a very big ship. 16 are 125,000 tons. These are extremely big ships. The new pace of building has been slowing down a bit. Our peak year was 2010, where 17 ships were delivered. This year in 2014, 6 ships will be delivered, but we continue to be ordering ships. As we're expanding in the world markets, we've been seeing that the Caribbean has been shrinking a little bit. Asia has been growing. The Mediterranean right now, after years of growth, has slowed down a little bit. South America, after years of growth, has slowed down a little bit. And Australia, after years of growth, has now reached an equilibrium. So as we look to grow, we're looking for markets beyond North America. And this is no surprise, but as recently as 12 years ago, about 80% of cruisers around the world were North Americans. Today it's less than 50%. So as an industry, we've been very successful at identifying, marketing, and promoting and selling to new source markets. And here we are having our first cruise forum in Taiwan, and I think that this is indicative. We're now growing in Asia, and I think that this will start to become probably an annual event of a cruise forum in Taiwan, because we're now starting to grow in Asia. There's also new brands. Viking Ocean, which was a Viking River Cruise, has ordered a couple of ships, and this is an astonishing thing because the capital cost to create a new cruise ship is huge. And Viking River Cruise has been quite successful, and they're now ordering cruise ships, so they're becoming a competitive cruise company, which is really interesting to us in the business. And then there's also, and I think there's some representatives in the audience today, there's some Chinese cruise lines that have been announced. They're going to start in classic fashion with some older hardware, but I know that their intention is to create new Chinese cruise lines with new hardware. This is very exciting for the industry, because the more competition, the better. There's more advertising and promotion and persuading people that they should want to consider to take a cruise. So we welcome new competition. How's my speaking pace? You can all keep up with me okay? Just wave your hand if I go too fast. Here's the topics I'm going to cover for the next few minutes. Is what drives the growth of the cruise business, and why do we enter new markets? First of all, of course, we are publicly traded companies that are trying to create profits. So our driving motive is profitability. And that means, and all of us approach it in different ways, like in any industry, trying to figure out ways to increase profits, increasing sales, controlling costs, reducing financing costs, trying to tweak the business model in every way imaginable. Sourcing passengers. To the extent we can find new passengers around the world, this helps us to grow our top line. Increasing the size of the ships. This is very efficient. Each ship needs one captain and one hotel director, whether it's a 200-passenger ship or a 6,000-passenger ship. There's inherent economic efficiencies of bigger ships. New routes. We want our old customers to cruise again. We're looking to find new customers. So we try new routes, new itineraries. It's a continual experiment of how to find routes that will appeal to customers. There's the fuel implication. Over the last 10 years, our most fastest growing component of our costs is fuel. And so many initiatives are taken within the industry to try to control fuel pricing. We call it the time-speed-distance equation of controlling where the ships sail and how fast they sail and the fuel that they consume. And finally, our functional economic drivers, which mean passenger spending. On certain routes, people spend more money, we make more profit. And so we're very driven looking at what our customers are doing and what we think they'll do in terms of figuring out where to send the ships. These are the themes we're going to cover. The profitability. As I described, there's 3 public companies, Carnival Group, Royal Caribbean, and Norwegian Cruise Lines. So you can follow them on Yahoo or the internet. You can buy stock in these companies. So their information is very public. Their gross sales increase as the fleets grow. All the ships are full all the time. For us to increase our sales, we must build more ships. And this is what the industry has been doing for the last 40 years. Increasing our net profits is more challenging. We can build new ships, we can find new customers, but trying to control the costs so that we can deliver increasing net profits, this is actually quite a challenge. Ships are huge capital investment. We have 6 ships at Royal Caribbean on order now. Each ship costs $1 billion. That's a lot of capital to deploy into one asset, so the business is very capital intensive. And then finally, the international diversification. Yes, of course, we can move the ships to new markets. We can bring ships into Asia and start to market them here, but it costs a lot of money to create sales and marketing operations, promotional campaigns, TV campaigns, promoting the idea of cruising and cruising on Royal Caribbean to a new market. This is a big undertaking. Here's a snapshot, and it's I'm not going to have too many financial pages like this, but it's a way to see what does the industry look like. And the first column is Carnival Group, 2010 and 2013. The second is Royal Caribbean, and the third is Norwegian. These are the 3 companies. You see that Carnival had gross revenues of about $15 billion US in 2013. They made net income of $1 billion US. And the Okay, and their cash from operations, though, it's a very good cash flowing operation, almost $3 billion of cash. But look at the 5th line. Carnival reinvested $2 billion in new ships during 2013. So they had excellent cash flow. They put it all back into building new ships. They made a dividend. They paid out $1 billion to their shareholders. And but the return on investment in 2014, 4%. Very modest. So I don't know how many Chinese investors would look at this as a good company to invest in. The return on investment is actually quite low because the business is so capital intensive. And you see that Royal Caribbean and Norwegian are more or less in the same range. Royal Caribbean had gross revenues of about $8 billion, a net income of almost $500 million, which seems pretty good. But we put a lot of cash back into capital expenditures, and the dividends, our return on investment is less than 5%. So it's a steady business, it's a growing business, but it's not a hugely profitable business. So we are constantly challenged to find better paying customers and trying to get more income return from our ships. So we're working hard, we're very focused on trying to make the companies profitable. And part of that is sourcing new customers. Because the ships are floating hotels, we can move them, and we constantly move them, looking for new customers. So who's cruising? Here's a snapshot of last year, the entire world. About 21 million people took a cruise. That's at less than 0.5% of the world population, for what that's worth. But the 7-year growth has been almost 30% over the last 7 years. So it's a good, steady, growing business. The USA has only grown 10% over the last 7 years. And so that's not very exciting. That's why we've been moving our business internationally to find new customers. And look at the success we've had. Germany, in the last 7 years, has grown by 80%. That's excellent in any business. And at the bottom, you see Brazil grew by 170% over 7 years. So we're finding by moving the ships to emerging markets and promoting and building up the markets, we're able to continue the growth of our industry, even though the U.S. as a source market has become fairly mature. These are over the last 10 years, the compounded growth. The entire world has been growing about 10% over the last 10 years. And in Europe, Germany and Italy have been the fastest growing markets. How about the emerging markets? We're in Asia. This is considered an emerging market. And you see it's pretty small groups, but we're sourcing from many different countries. Scandinavia, Holland, South America, Mexico, Argentina. China. In the last couple of years, China has emerged from nothing. That last year, about 500,000 Chinese took a cruise. Now, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the population of China, but we're very excited about this because we see that there is potential to grow in China, and that's why we're all here today. That the big source market for Taiwan, of course, is going to be Chinese people taking a cruise. Japan is a more mature travel market, but has never really achieved very big numbers for cruising. India, same thing. We see longer-term potential. That's probably going to be the next growth market after China. And the potential is very good. As I mentioned, this year about 22 million people will take a cruise. If we could only tap 0.5% of the rest of the world, it would add another 16 million customers. So this is where we're focused. How can we target and source new customers from these markets? If we could get 0.5% out of China, that would be 5 million customers. We would be very excited because it means there'd be a lot of customers coming to Taiwan, and all of us in the cruise industry would be growing. So we think there's a lot of potential, and that's what's driving the focus on the Asian market. Where are the ships sailing? This is where the deployment is. The previous slide was who are the customers. This is where berth capacity, that means allocation of ships. And in Asia and Australia, it's only 7% of the cruise industry. So we still have barely made a dent, and most of that is Australia, which has had very good success over the last 10 years. So we're just getting started in Asia, and I think all of us share the excitement about the potential. Here's another way that we look at it is a pie chart, like where in the world are the ships cruising. The industry has tripled since the last 13 or 14 years, but North America's percentage share has declined. It's international, and Europe has what's been growing, and international is Asia and Australia. So it's grown from 4% of the industry 10 years ago to about 10%, still has a lot of potential for growth. The size of the ships, as I mentioned, this is another factor that's driving our growth, because it may be in destinations, it's not that there's more ships coming, but as time passes, larger ships come, bringing more passengers, and it's passengers who spend money in destinations, and that's what everyone's interest is, to get more touristic volume into the destinations. If we look at 2010, that was the peak year of new construction. 17 ships were delivered. That's a lot of ships. Those ships were ordered before the financial crisis. So they were ordered in 2005 and 2006 and 2007. So this was the peak year in the history of the cruise business that 17 ships were delivered. 2011, the 8 ships were delivered. These also were pre-crisis ships. And now as we get into 2012, 2013, these are ships now that were ordered after the crisis. Things started to slow down. Only 6 ships in 2012. Only 6 ships were delivered in 2013, only 5 ships in 2014. So the industry slowed down a lot in new construction after the big financial crisis of 2009. But the world is starting to recover. The important thing to see here is that the ship size, on average, grew to 3,500 passengers per ship. So the size of the ship, dramatically larger than what was built 5 years earlier. In 2015, it's growing. Next year, 7 ships are going to be delivered. 2016, 10 ships. Whoa, the industry's recovering. We're ordering more ships. As you saw, the capital allocation from all the major cruise lines, we're all spending billions on building new ships. And 2016 is going to be a milestone because 1 million tons of new ships are going to be delivered in 2016. This will be quite a milestone for the industry. Over $6 billion will be spent on ships in 2016. 2017, 4 ships are going to be delivered. There's still more orders coming, though, for 2017 and 2018. It takes about 2 years to build a ship. So the average ship size is getting bigger, and the volume and number of cruise ships ordered is slowly growing again. But as you see, it's a constant, steady growth, and the ships have to go somewhere. Every ship that's built sails 52 weeks a year. On average, we're doing 7-day cruises. On average, each ship stops in 4 ports a week and a home port. So each ship is making 5 port calls a week, times 50 weeks is 250 port calls a year. So each ship that comes out, and you see how many ships are being built, is stopping 250 times in different ports. So the need for the infrastructure and for the ports and destinations to upgrade and expand and develop never ends. Now, when we're looking at building infrastructure, when ports are looking, these are the two classes of ships that should be the focus. The Freedom of the Seas is a Royal Caribbean ship of 340 meters. This is the workhorse of the industry. Every cruise brand is building a ship of this size. Every brand of Carnival Group, every brand of Norwegian Group, everybody, even the new ships being considered by the Chinese brands are going to be of this size. This is the standard, most efficiently designed ship, and everyone is building this. Now, Royal Caribbean, we always are upping the ante and pressing the envelope. We've now developed the Oasis of the Seas. We have 2 of them. We've ordered 3 more of them. So these big ships are going to be growing, and eventually the rest of the industry catches up with us. So Royal tends to build the first big ship, and then over the next 5 years, our competitors also build. So if you're working on infrastructure, thinking about it, these are the size ships to design for. The Freedom of the Seas is 340 meters, carries about 4,000 guests. Again, this is the standard workhorse ship of the industry. The Oasis is a bigger ship. It's 360 meters, carries about 6,000 guests. And so this requires every port that Oasis calls needs some type of adaptation or improvement in order for the port to work. Here's the Legend of the Seas. This was built around 1990. And it was one of the early ships of the cruise business, which is still, Legend of the Seas, still operating in Asia. Brilliance of the Seas came out in 1999. It's 290 meters. The Voyager of the Seas came out in 2000. It's 311 meters, and the Voyager is already calling in Taiwan. The Freedom of the Seas, as I mentioned, 340 meters, and this is the new workhorse of the industry. And finally, the Oasis of the Seas, 360. So you see the trend. As the years pass, the ships are getting bigger. Again, you get the sense of the size and the capacity. There's some ports in the world where the Oasis cannot fit under the bridge. So it's important, for example, at Shanghai, we cannot come into Shanghai port. We call it Baoshan Port in the outskirts of Shanghai. If you haven't seen it, that's the Oasis ship in the Bahamas next to a Disney and MSC ships, which are the Panamax ship, 290 meters. So you see, the Oasis of the Seas is a much bigger ship. Longer, taller, wider, deeper. So new routes. So we've looked at now the profitability of the cruise lines and how important that is to us, sourcing new customers in order to grow, building larger ships for the efficiencies, and looking for new routes to attract repeat passengers and new passengers. So we're entering diverse markets, and this is a never-ending process. We are constantly looking at new markets and trying ships, experimenting, looking at, can we make this work? Usually we'll try with a small ship and see if it works. If it starts to work, we'll add a larger ship over time. We know that our repeat customers, and cruising is a repeat business. Most people don't stop with one cruise. Once they've tried it, they do it again. We're looking for fuel-efficient routes. Where can we save fuel by shortening the distances? When we've oversaturated a market, right now the industry is pulling back a little bit from the Mediterranean and Brazil, where we grew too much and the pricing started to come down. Now we retreat a little bit, and we've moved some ships from the Mediterranean to Asia. So again, they're floating hotels. We can move them to new markets to find new customers. And then there's what I call, for Royal Caribbean, the new ship displacement factor. When the Oasis came to Miami, it pushed out the Freedom of the Seas, which had been our ship operating in Miami. It went to the UK. That pushed out the Voyager, which was in the UK, and it moved to Asia. The Brilliance of the Seas had been operating in Asia. We moved it over to Dubai. The Legend had been operating in Dubai. We moved it to Venice. You see, it's like a chess game of moving the ships around the world. And finally, Legend replaced Sovereign of the Seas, which we moved to our Spanish brand, Pullman Tour. So there's this constant evolution for the Royal Caribbean fleet of moving our ships around and repositioning them in different markets in the world. For Royal Caribbean, these are the top home ports in the world. In order, Fort Lauderdale for us now is the #1 port because it's where the Oasis is based. Miami, of course, these are the 2 busiest ports. But also Fort Canaveral. So for Royal Caribbean, even though only 50% of our traffic is North American, our 3 biggest home ports are still the Florida ports. San Juan is very important in the wintertime in the Caribbean. Barcelona is the #1 port in Europe. Civitavecchia is the #2 port in Europe. In New Jersey, we created a port for us that services our New York market. and so on and so forth. For home port design, there's been many spectacular facilities built in Asia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, a fantastic facility. But what we've seen is that the new facilities that have been built in Asia have been more like showpieces, iconic images of, whoa, this fantastic facility. But what the cruise line needs is form. We really want functionality where it works well for the customers. And I'm going to show you an example of our best performing home port. What are the things we really look for? Architecture is nice, but what's important is an easy drop-off. It's easy to get from your car or bus to the ship. Convenient parking if you drive. Short walking distances so that there's not a huge maze to go through, but you get quickly from the taxi to the ship. Minimizing the lines, very important. The guests want to get on the ship. A nice open air ambiance, skylights is nice, but pure functionality. The guests want to get on the ship. So when we see these fantastically designed architectural terminals, this is really more for the benefit of the community and the mayor and the government. What we need is basically a box to get the customers through the facility. We love the beautiful architectural facilities, but we really need functionality. I'll give you some of the things we require. I'm not going to dwell on this, but I'll put it up there for a second. These are the basics that we need for functionality, and this slides will be available to anybody that wants the technical material. Same thing dockside. What is a Freedom class? And again, every cruise line is operating Freedom class ships. So these are the standards, and there's no mystery about it. This is what we need for functionality. For a home port, there's basic things we need: being able to bring the containers to the ship, getting the guests conveniently to the ship, loading the ship with water is very basic service things. Security considerations, having good area to move around with so there's not big crowds of people, good moving and logistics of buses and taxis, being able to process the luggage, having a waiting room in case a ship gets delayed by a storm or something. What's very important for home ports is airlift coming into the town, good connectivity between the airport and the port. Again, these are sort of details about the functionality of a home port, but from us in the industry, this is the basics that we require. When we get involved in developing something, this is the basic template. And here's an example of in Fort Lauderdale. This was the facility that was built for the Oasis, the world's largest ship. There's 90 check-in stations. The goal was that nobody has to wait in line more than 5 minutes. So shorter than an airport, but in a very condensed time. Everybody gets on the ship in 2 hours, and it works. The waiting time is about 3 minutes. You come in, you give your luggage, maybe there's one person in front of you in line, and it's very functional. And it's very flexible. It's just a warehouse. There's nothing sexy about this building, but it's purely functional. It's a large building, about 15,000 meters, but very good drop-off zones you see for the buses and taxis. It's all very well thought out, so the traffic flow is very smooth. Everything moves very quickly. Good staging area for the 20 containers that we need for the ship. Here's the check-in stations. You see there's 90 stations, so this is like a huge airport. The guests are all coming in. They want to get on the ship, and it functions very well. This is a waiting area. Fortunately, we've never used it, but just in case the ship got held up by bad weather, the guests could be sitting in this area. Very good functional FMT gangways, so these are very flexible and mobile. They can service any ship. A huge luggage laydown area. This is a vast area where tractors bring in the luggage. It's all color-coded. We can unload 6,000 passengers in 1.5 hours. That's a very, very functional, good logistics. Here's another example of a project we're designing with land planning. Scott Laguerre is going to speak tomorrow. In Turkey, we needed a new home port. This was the old cruise port. Very dilapidated, obsolete warehouses. With the government, we selected a new site. It's a greenfield site. We're going to push into the sea in Istanbul. And it's going to be a huge project, mixed use, almost a Chinese-style project in that there'll be hotel towers, office towers, residential towers, shopping center, 1,000 yacht marina, and 5 cruise facilities. And designed aesthetically, but with pure functionality, so that 5 ships can be serviced. And this is a project that we're working on with the Turkish government, Turkish partners, and the Carnival Group may join Royal Caribbean in this project. I'm going to switch now to destinations. And for Taiwan, which is primarily a destination today, may be a home port in the future, and for some of the other countries that might be represented here today, the Philippines perhaps, Vietnam perhaps, Southeast Asia countries of Thailand and Malaysia, and then certainly Korea and Japan are destinations. And so what is it that we look for in destinations? Smooth passenger flows, getting the guests off the ship quickly and into the destination, conveniences and services, shops and restaurants, things for people to do in the vicinity of the cruise port. A thematic design makes some sense. Let's differentiate one port from the next by using some thematic elements. Appealing aesthetics. Many ports, most ports in the world start out as cargo ports that have just pure industrial aesthetics. We're trying to upgrade ports in the world to make them more appealing for tourism. And then local cultural influences to the extent that we can identify them. And these items, we work closely with destinations in the world. If they're developing it, encouraging them to include these elements. If we're also involved, we include all these things. The goal for a destination port is you want the guest to be reluctant to return to the ship. What we see around the world, if the guests get off the ship in the morning and head back to the ship at lunchtime, that port is a failure because the guests will, oh, okay, this was boring. I'm going to go back and have lunch on the ship because lunch is free on the ship. The successful ports are the ports where at 4:30 in the afternoon, the guests are still having a drink on the dock because they're having so much fun, they don't want to go back to the ship. This is the goal of every port, is to be a port where the guests are reluctant to leave. If that's the case, it's a success because it means maybe they'll come back. And you want the guests to come back for fly-in vacations and stay in hotels. And you want them to stay on the dock in the town as long as possible. And our more successful ports achieve this. I'm going to give you an example now, kind of a case study. We developed with the Jamaican government a new port in the Caribbean, Falmouth, Jamaica, and we called it Historic Falmouth, Jamaica. That's the branded name of the port. It's on the main route. A lot of cruise ships in the Caribbean sail past Jamaica from Miami. Falmouth was not a port. Our primary ports were Montego Bay and Ocho Rios. The government asked us if we could create a new port for the Oasis in this town. It's a tiny little town of about 3,000 or 4,000 people. It's a town that time had passed by. There was really nothing going on here. It was not even a port. We designed a new port picking up on the history and the culture of this town of Falmouth. And the design was we dredged and we pushed into the sea, and we created about 12 hectares of new land and in a port that could accommodate the Oasis of the Seas. It's a thematic design, so we picked up the architectural heritage of Jamaica. There's beautiful shops in the port. There's very nicely done vendors' kiosks for local craftsmen. This is a wonderful vendors mart. These are people who make local crafts and artisans in Jamaica. And we created a vendors mart program. Now, in many destinations, there's some crappy little tents or it's not well designed, and we thought for Falmouth, we wanted to make it special. We created a program, we trained the vendors, we created criteria, it became self-enforcing. The vendors now manage the program. We created a way where local vendors could take turns. Every 3 months they rotate so that there is a variety of vendors. And it creates work for 160 local people selling local merchandise, and it's been very successfully received by the visitors because we've created rules, they're enforced, the vendors wear uniforms, they have a name tag, and it's set up in a manner that it's a very pleasant vending experience. We think this is very important in every destination. The guests want to shop at a vendor's mart, but it has to be set up with the right policies. Here's some of the guidelines. They have to wear the uniform. We teach them you cannot touch the guests. You cannot walk with the guests. You have to stand in your spot. You can't have your merchandise on the floor. It must be on a table or hanging up. Very simple rules. It makes a big difference in how it's perceived by the guests. People spend more money when it's properly organized, and we've worked with many ports to make this work well. Also, the taxis. This is another issue in many ports, especially when they first start. Everybody with a taxi, oh, I want to drive somebody. Me. Take my taxi. I'm a cheaper taxi. Every new port, we have this issue with local taxis. And for the politicians, it's difficult because the taxis are voters and they have political influence in many places. And the politicians, we're afraid of the taxis. No, it's very important to create policies that I'll show you here. We've got, I thought I had it here. We've created taxi policies, and it's the same thing. Uniforms, inspections, insurance, guidelines, pricing. You cannot undercut the stated prices. There's ways of doing this. Another thing that we've done is a trolley in Falmouth so that people can take a little inexpensive trolley around the town just as a way to experience the local town. There's a party every day in the Falmouth port, so there's this feeling of, hey, let's hang out and have a rum and kind of a festive party. It was nominated the Seaport Port of the Year in 2011. This year it's getting almost 700,000 guests from zero, and about 6 different cruise lines are calling at Jamaica now at historic Falmouth. It's been in every way a big success. Here's a second example, is in Roatan, Honduras. This was a port that only had 50,000 guests. It was nothing. Now it's grown to 800,000 guests. It's so successful, we created a port. The Carnival Group has also created a port, and this is a tiny island of 20,000 people that is now getting 800,000 cruise guests. So, wow, they're doing something well. We did a venture with the government. It's a small island. It was just a piece of concrete dock that was getting hardly any traffic, but it was horrific. It was just a kind of a muddy swamp. The buses were all jammed together. Like, there was no way we would take our guests to this destination. But after we developed it, we organized it in a very correct way. Good bus staging area, about 4,000 feet of shops. There's a second phase planned of hotels and additional shops. Thematic Caribbean architecture. It's open at night with restaurants and bars for the local population. There's an expansion phase planned with a marina. And this is the taxi staging area, and we thought this through quite well because it was just a mess before. And so we created policies, and we created a facility. And it's quite a policy that we worked, and this took a year with the government and the taxis. Let's create a good taxi policy so the guests feel welcome, and it also creates proper business for the taxi drivers. And one of the most important things is establishing pricing so that all the taxis honor the pricing and they don't start saying, I can do it cheaper, where they cannot make any money. So working with the government, we've established good policies. We try to duplicate this concept in every port in the world. One more example, in Kusadasi, Turkey, just to be in a different part of the world. With Turkish partners, we expanded an old port where we created appropriate facilities in contemporary Turkish architecture. There's about 5,000 meters of shops and restaurants. And this is a very busy port in Turkey. And it gets about 600,000 passengers a year. And over 1 million people a year come into the shopping center from the hotel zone. We're working on Newport in Barbados. Scott's going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow. We're going to move the port closer to the town of Barbados. It's going to be a wonderful mixed-use project with shops and hotels and restaurants and bars. And so you start to get the idea that we're organizing these destinations in a comprehensive way. And let's consider what are the key ingredients to make a destination work. And now this is starting to be some useful information. Name recognition. Do the customers know the place? Okay, in Jamaica, they do know Jamaica, but in Taiwan, do the customers know Kaohsiung Port as a place to visit? Appeal. Is the mass market customer interested? We're in the mass market business. We're carrying passengers 3,000, 4,000. This is not a boutique or niche. It needs to be the largest part of the market. Are they interested? Is there an icon? Of course, when you travel to France, you want to see the Eiffel Tower and take a picture of the Eiffel Tower. In Taiwan, are there images? Are there places that can be promoted that when people come here, they want to see that, they want to take a picture, they want to do a selfie of themselves with that image behind. Yesterday we went to the big Buddha temple north of Kaohsiung, and I think that's the type of a place that can be promoted as, oh, when you come to Taiwan, you want to see the big sitting Buddha, the largest in the world. It's that type of thing that motivates the guests. we're only in port for a limited time. There's about 6 hours. So about the maximum anybody wants to ride on a bus is about 1 hour. So what can be delivered in a day experience within 6 hours? And some of the things, local culture, handicrafts, cuisine. Taiwan is famous for its seafood. History, fantastic history in Taiwan. Heritage, beautiful nature, Hualien, the Grand Canyon of Taiwan. Architectural edifices, the huge Chiang Kai-shek statue. This is like quite a thing to see in Taipei. These are the kinds of things that visitors want to see, and this is what needs to be promoted to make the destinations appeal. Here's the example from Jamaica again. You saw the design of Jamaica. Name recognition. Americans are fascinated by Jamaica. They think it's kind of a cool place. Time, speed, and distance. Every ship in the Caribbean can sail easily past Jamaica. Cultural icon. They have Bob Marley and reggae music. Americans love this as a cultural food. Jamaica is famous for its local foods, and it's popular and well-known. Beverage. Appleton Rum is a very famous brand in the U.S. It's made in Jamaica, so there's an Appleton Rum tour. History. There's these wonderful plantations that were old slave plantations, but they are beautiful old homes that have been restored, and they've made them into tours. Famous person. The world's fastest man, Usain Bolt, was born in Falmouth, Jamaica. So we've made this part of the promotion. There's a statue of Usain Bolt in the port. Iconic tourist attraction. For years, Jamaica has been promoting a particular waterfall, and as a place to visit when you come to Jamaica. They promote it. We offer bus tours to go to that famous waterfall. And the price. The port is competitively priced with other Caribbean ports. So all the factors that are necessary for destination success, we wove into this Falmouth port that I gave you the example. The fuel cost implications, time, speed, and distance. Ideally for the ships, we travel about 200 nautical miles a night. I'm going to show you some itineraries, and we look at them with 200-mile radiuses, because that's the distance. If the ship sails at 18 knots for about 12 or 14 hours, leaves at 6 o'clock, arrives at 7 the next morning, that's the distance we can comfortably sail. That's one of the drivers to conserve fuel of our routes. So now I'm going to look at a couple of the routes in Southeast Asia. The primary home ports, of course, are Hong Kong and Singapore. The up-and-coming home ports are Kaohsiung, I think has great potential, and Xiamen, China, they're building a new port. Manila, Philippines has the potential for home port, and then also Shenzhen in Guangzhou has it's planning to be a home port as well. So there's going to be good home ports in this region for reaching Taiwan in this zone. Here's a couple examples. From Hong Kong, we can sail to Sanya, to Vietnam, in the south, and Vietnam in the north. So this would be a short cruise, and we think Chinese customers like to take short cruises. Another direction would be from a ship in Hong Kong or from Xiamen, touching Penghu Island, Kaohsiung, Keelung, Hualien, Ishigaki, Okinawa. This would be probably a 6 or 7 day cruise, and you see the radiuses of 200 nautical miles. That's how we measure the distance for the itineraries. As you know, yesterday we made an announcement about the Penghu port. I'll show you a slide of that idea in a moment. Here's another idea of sailing south from Hong Kong to Sanya and touching the Philippines. We think this has interesting potential. Xiamen is, in 2 years, is going to have a brand new facility. We think Xiamen is going to become a major base port, home port for Chinese source customers, and they'll be able to do all these tours, routes just like Hong Kong. Here's a longer route. We could take a ship in 7 days from Hong Kong down to Singapore, touching the Philippines and East Malaysia. And then that ship the next week could return, so people could take a 14-day cruise if they want, or an open jaw that would be sailing one way and flying back the other way. So we think this is a route that's going to grow as well. The ships might be based in Taiwan in the future. They would probably sail south, but in the summertime they could also sail north to Japan. So you see there's a lot of different combinations that are possible. We made an announcement about Penghu Island. The TIPC and the government of Taiwan have encouraged the idea that Penghu could be a cruise destination, and we think it can. So because we've got expertise and experience in developing cruise ports, we've entered into a collaboration where together we're designing to convert a small naval facility in Penghu Island into a cruise port with a thematic village. And we think that it's because Penghu is only 100 miles from Xiamen and about 300 miles from Hong Kong, we think that it will, in a couple of years, start to become a regular part of the itineraries of all the cruise ships that are sailing from those markets coming toward Taiwan. And then there's the Singapore-based ships. The traditional route is the Straits of Malacca up to Phuket. There's also the route that goes to Koh Samui and also to Bangkok and also touches Ho Chi Minh City. This is another popular route out of Singapore. And then there's the eastern route going to East Malaysia and touching the Philippines. So there's 3 good routes for ships based in Singapore in Southeast Asia. And then, as I mentioned, I think that eventually Manila is going to become a base port because there's some very nice places to visit in the Philippines, and the airlift into Manila is quite good. So you see evolving, I gave you more information at the beginning about how the cruise business is growing, and you see that there's many possible routes that we and our competitors will start to, by trial and error, try to find what works best. This is my last slide, and I'll spend a couple of minutes on it because I think it's the most important. I kind of arbitrarily made this up as the 4 Ps, but I think it's an important takeaway for the destinations. And each of you who are working in a destination port, to focus on this list and to be thinking about your own destination and how can you fit into this list is very important. The product. That means, what will the customers do when they get there? If a ship comes into Kaohsiung, what are the guests going to do? What's the product? And what experiences, what attractions can be offered? And guests like choice. They like to have a lot of different things to do, but they also like that there be one thing, some icon, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Big Buddha. One thing that they remember, I want to do that when I visit that place. So the product is the beginning. Why should somebody want to come to Kaohsiung? Penghu. Why should someone want to go to Penghu? The product is the most important ingredient for the marketing. Then packaging, all right? Maybe you have a product. How can you package that? How can you deliver that in a manner that's easy to understand, either on a television commercial or in a print ad or in the many different social media ways now with Facebook and different ways, tweets of reaching the customers? How can the package be branded in a manner that people go, when I visit Kaohsiung, I want to do this because that's what I've seen. This is what inspires the customers, and this is how we grow a market. You saw my examples for Falmouth. We've created a product. We've created a package. We've given people reasons that they would want to go to Falmouth, Jamaica. Promotion. How can the message be gotten across? How can you find those target customers? And this is working with the Department of Tourism, with the travel agencies, with the other governments. We've been encouraging the Hong Kong government to work with Taiwan to promote Taiwan as a cruise destination. Hong Kong is a base port. It's not a destination port. They've spent a real lot of money on a terminal. We said, look, spend a little bit of money promoting the destinations, which are primarily Taiwan, Vietnam, and the Philippines. This is where you can go from Hong Kong. So we've asked Hong Kong Tourism, please work with the regional governments and promote the idea of cruising, and then ships will come to Hong Kong to be based there. This is very important, and it's thinking about that product and the packaging and how can it be presented in a commercial or into materials that could be sent to travel agents. And then profitability. With those other elements in place, the customers will pay a premium. They'll be asking us, we want to take a cruise to Kaohsiung, Taiwan. Once we reach that point, and maybe it takes a few years to get there, now the business really starts to work. And we've seen this in the other parts of the world. That at first we might have a place that nobody's really thinking of for a vacation, but by creating a product, by packaging it, by promoting it, now the customers will start to pay a premium. I want to go there. I'll pay for a vacation to go there. And this is collectively what we're all trying to achieve. We're trying to build our business and grow it. And these 4 Ps are the way that it grows and is the way for each of your destinations with your Ministry of Tourism to be achieving the goal of growing the cruise business. So that's all my comments, and I hope that's been useful. This will be available. TIPC and the conference will have it. I don't mind to share this with anybody. I've asked them if they could also translate it into Chinese so that it could be available for the non-English speakers. And I'm available for any questions. I don't know if there's time for a question. Okay, good, good. So it's my pleasure, if anybody has a question, because I tried to leave a little bit of time, if anybody wants to ask me something about anything I presented or anything else about the cruise business, it would be my pleasure to answer.
The floor is now open for your questions. We're going to have lunch at 11:30, so I believe we have 20 minutes plus time. Plenty of time for questions.
Sure, Eric.
Okay, we'll pass you the mic. Please state your name, your affiliation, your question. Thank you.
This is Eli Yoshida from Kaiser Press, and then, I'm a journalist of the cruise magazine. So I would like to ask about the Japanese cruise market. You said it's already mature, but how to think about for example, home port to set the home port to Japan, or how to say, how to think about the port of call to Japan.
Sure. The Japanese market, I'll be honest, at least for we American-based cruise brands, has been a bit of a puzzle to us, because we see that Japanese people like to travel everywhere in the world, and for many decades, the Japanese, they've had a successful economy, they have good household income, and they like to take vacations. It seems this is an ideal market for cruising. Yet you saw the numbers, the penetration in Japan is very small. And frankly, it's hard to explain why. I think that we've tried. I know presently Princess Cruises has focused for the last couple of years on trying to really focus on building up more Japanese clientele. Over the years, we've viewed the Japanese as like international clientele, and so if we can get 3% of a ship of Japanese customers, we're happy. And there's, the NYK brand, which is focused on the Japanese market, but they've never really grown. They have 1 or 2 ships, so it's not. I would say the answer is hard to explain. North Americans like to fly to Japan and take a cruise that would start in Tokyo or Yokohama and visit China and Vietnam and Thailand. This is very appealing to a North American, but this is a very small niche market, and it's probably always going to be a small niche market because it's such a long flight just to take a vacation. So we all hope that there could be more of a Japanese market. I think different initiatives have been tried to reach into the Japanese household market, which we think is, decision making is dominated by wives in Japan, and we find around the world wives push their husbands to take cruises, and so all of our marketing and advertising is targeted at the female, and it's been successful everywhere in the world, but for some reason has not been so successful in Japan. I think it's well placed. Excellent cruises can come from Japan. And we would love if Japanese people would fly to Alaska and try that cruise as well. But for some reason, we don't. I think in Japan, there's still a perception that cruising is something that old people do. It might be part of the element. And so, when you're retired, you take a cruise. Where most of the rest of the world, the average age has been coming down and down. And on the ships, we're making the product on the ships more active. And the average age for Royal Caribbean is about 42 years old now. So. And some brands is even younger. So part of it is that might be perception still in Japan that they still view it as something that old people do.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question. Actually, wives in Taiwan also make decisions.
Oh, that's very good. So that means we have excellent potential in Taiwan.
Okay, and in China as well. So we have time for another question. I believe someone is raising their hand there. We'll pass you the mic. Please state your name, your affiliation, and, of course, your question.
ROI of the largest 3 lines, and can you show us some secret or your comment about the increase of ROI of the NCL? that's different from CCL and RCL.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. The outer eye, I didn't.
Our return of investment.
Oh,
Yeah, you have shown that from 2010 to 2013, and the return, the profit. Okay, we can say that is profit, and the management profit of NCL actually is increased.
Yes.
Yeah. So, do you have any comment or some idea about their management secret or something else? Then they can increase their profit.
Okay. I understand the question. Very good. Okay, his question is that I made a slide comparing the three big companies, Carnival, Royal, and Norwegian, and I showed statistics, this was from Goldman Sachs, of 2010 and 2013 showing the return on investment. And in these last 3 years, the company that has had, let's say, the most success in growing their return on investment is the Norwegian group. And I think we can explain that. In the last couple of years, both Carnival and Royal have been trying to diversify their markets more internationally. And that means we've been taking more experiments with our cruise ships, and we've been spending a lot of money to develop, let's say right now, we're spending a lot of money in China on sales and marketing that we have not really seen a return yet on that investment, but we're planning for the future, but that's an expense. Norwegian in the last 3 years, under new management, and they're very good, they've completely focused on North America and particularly on New York. They're very focused. It's a smaller company. They only have 9 ships. And so their focus has been on targeting North American customers in New York. So their advertising, their sales, their marketing, everything is very focused in this manner, where Royal and Carnival in the last couple of years after the financial crisis felt that we had to diversify, and we've been spending more money spreading the ships around the world. Now, as time passes, I would make the case that what we're doing is intelligent, and that by making that investment and spending that money, we're going to grow in Asia and find financial success over time. But in the last couple of years, the focus of Norwegian has in fact been very profitable for them. Their stock has been soaring, and it's a very good story right now about Norwegian. But this is not a one-inning game. The business competition continues over time, and I would argue that the long-term strategy of Royal and Carnival probably comes out successful over time. But my point about that was how difficult it is to make a profit in the cruise business. We make a profit, but the return on the huge amounts of capital is quite challenging, and that was sort of the idea of that slide. It's a very challenging business. But good question.
Okay, we have another question here. Your name, affiliation, and your question.
Morning. I'm Jin Chen from Golden Foundation Tours. I'm very much delighted to see that Royal Caribbean has been cooperating with TIPC and the Taiwan government to build up a new port in Penghu. I've been there quite a few times. They say it's really, really beautiful. But I'd just like to know your target passengers are only from Chinese tourists, or the target passenger you plan to have for Chinese and also international tourists? This is my first question. My second question is, last April and May, the direct sailing between China and Taiwan, the two governments seems approved. In fact, I've seen it is approved, but still a lot of vague. And so the vague is none of any international cruise line up until now. You really apply for the direct sale between China and Taiwan. The reason, as far as I understand, is the vague point is the Chinese side, you cannot tell how long you can send your applications. According to the international cruise line, if you design any itinerary for year-round, you'll have to send application 2 years ahead or minimum 1.5 years ahead. And you need to know the results. You approve when we can get the proof. So you can start to sell, to promote. but still in vague point. Because I'm talking about Penghu, I was there several times lately. It's not only attract Chinese tourists. The attraction for Chinese tourists, because there are two very popular singers, they all passed away. And the elderly Chinese people, they still are very much fond of their singing, but not for the younger generation. Maybe they forgot them already. But for international tourists, it's very, very important destinations. They have a very nice beach and a very good culture, because Penghu, just as you said, is 100 miles away from Hokkien. And that's the first settler place for the Chinese migrants. Before to Taiwan, they went to Penghu. So they have a historical background. And also the natures, you know, the basalt column, and the oldest temple of Matsu there. And the oldest town, I think you've been visiting those places, and the wheel of 400 years. There's all these things, a small town, still not very many international tourists going there, not spoiled yet. But, so I think it's not only a place for Chinese tourists, also from international tourists. But how? You're going to work with our government, together with Chinese government, to really clear the vague point. How long the Chinese part could allow the international cruise lines to send application for the serious bookings. Thank you.
Wait, I'm sorry, when you say approval, do you mean visas? Are you talking about visas, or what are you talking about, approvals?
Well, the approval for the international cruise line to sail between any port of China to Taiwan and any ports of Taiwan to China. This is a direct sale. And I think a lot of international tourists, they really like to see Taiwan and China, because like from Shanghai, cosmopolitan city is really beautiful. But they all like to see Taiwan, because for the last 60 years, or more than last 60 years, the development of culture and the tradition of Chinese culture.
Okay, no, now I understand your question, and yes, you're correct. It's still difficult to get approval to sail a ship directly from China to Taiwan. You're correct. And I believe, yeah, this is why initially the ships that come to Taiwan are coming from Japan or coming from Hong Kong, because it's not so difficult. And I think this is an important, let's say, legal technical element that does need to be addressed. There's people here I know today from Xiamen Port and from Shenzhen Port that they both aspire to be big cruise ports. Those are Chinese ports, and they need to be working with their government to get this permission for approval of itineraries that go directly from China to Taiwan. We anticipate there seems to be a receptivity in the Chinese government that this is the direction that they're supporting, but you're correct. It still is quite a process to get the approval for such a thing, but admittedly there's a lot of history and baggage between Taiwan and China that needs to be resolved, also for the individual visas for the Chinese that want to come to Taiwan. So yes, there are legal technicalities that need to be addressed, and I think that that's a combination of our own initiatives, but also your government's initiatives interacting with China, and the Chinese ports trying to persuade their governments that this is a good thing. I appreciate all of the many nice things you had to say about Penghu. The place is completely unknown to Westerners, and I agree, it has a lot of great potential as a cruising destination. We think that there's a lot of connectivity to mainland Chinese because of the historical elements which you mentioned. So the Penghu Island is today mostly Taiwanese visiting Penghu, so it's very underdeveloped for international tourism. We think this project, which will take a couple years to create, will be a way to deliver Penghu Island to an international crowd. It's hard to get there today. There's limited flights and ferries, so it's hard to get there. But we think that the product there will deliver very well as a day experience for visitors. And already we've started discussions with the Taiwanese Ministry of Tourism about exactly this slide that I showed before for Penghu, how to create these elements of the product and the packaging and the promotion about Penghu Island. And I think with a couple of years of work, it will come together in a positive way. I can tell there's a lot of support in Taiwan to try to promote Penghu as an interesting international destination.
Okay. And thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our Keynote 1 and our QA. Our applause to thank Mr. John Tursik, Vice President of Commercial Development, Royal Caribbean Cruise Limited. Thank you, sir, for your sharing. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe it's 11:30, so we now break for lunch. Lunch for 2 hours is at room 305. You go outside this room, you turn right, you meet room 305. Lunch is right over there. And I advise you could go to the restroom before lunch, and then please enjoy 2 hours of lunch. We come back, we reconvene at 1:30. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do enjoy your lunch.